Hello and welcome, stargazers. This is APM, your intrepid star guide, and this is the Outlaw Astrology podcast, in which we discuss everything mystical, occult, and esoteric through the lens of astrology and sometimes tarot and numerology. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about the Golden Dawn system, and we're talking about, in particular, astrology and tarot and the Golden Dawn associations. And we also have a newsletter called the Daily Stargazer with a free and paid version. And you can also find the Outlaw Astrology podcast on YouTube, Apple iTunes, and etc. And those are the places where you're most likely, also Spotify, and where you're most likely, if you can, give us 5 stars so that other people can find the podcast and also benefit. And you will find the links for these in the show notes as well. And, well, welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get on with it. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Golden Dawn system, and that is based on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It's a late 19th century occult society and early 20th century occult society that created a structured system of correspondences. Now, this system is the basis for at least 2 tarot decks, the first being the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and the second being the Tote deck, which is a Crowley creation with Lady Freda Harris, who is also a member of the Golden Dawn. The Rider-Waite-Smith is Rider, Waite, and Smith would be the publisher, the artist, Smith, and the creator collaborator. Okay, so that's what that stands for very briefly. And so this system has astrological signs, planets, elements, decans that are assigned to specific tarot cards. So creating a symbolic language that connects with both systems. And that while other systems, the Marseille and the Tote, the Golden Dawn system structure has become the foundation for a modern tarot deck, particularly the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So these are Rider-Waite-Smith associations, and Tote and Marseille are very different systems. Yes, they have similarities with the Rider-Waite-Smith, but they also are their own thing and requires their own understanding. So those correspondences, as they are, do not necessarily flow back and forth. You cannot use one particularly when using another. So whatever I say today, it is the Rider-Waite-Smith that we're talking about, because that is the most commonly used deck, the most commonly referenced deck, and most people have a understanding of Rider-Waite-Smith and those key associations. So over a period of a few episodes, I am going to be going into this system as an overview first, because I have other plans which I will share later on. So, the understanding, this foundation will allow you, to create your own meaningful correspondences later, which is the whole point of the exercise. If these correspondences, when you hear them, make sense to you and you prefer to use them and continue to use them, a lot of people do, that's also fine. However, I'm of a mind that sometimes I look at the correspondences and I go, I say to myself, I don't know, this doesn't make any sense to me. Now, when I did my own research, and you are free to do so as well, T. Susan Chang has a few books you can find on, all you have to do is use the name T. Susan Chang, Chang, and you can go to Amazon or book any website selling books, and or even whatever website of your choosing, you can find that name, and then they will have tarot books, and they break it down quite nicely, because this system I'm presenting is one of many systems. And it's not the only one, it's just the most popularized. And the reason why I'm saying that is because people it's not unusual for people to believe that because something is normalized, popularized, therefore it must be the truth, and that is just not the case. It is merely the most popular system used because it's often mentioned, but if you read T. Susan Chang's work, and by the way, not an affiliate, links anywhere, I just liked the book and found it useful, and you might as well, because if you're listening to this podcast, you like to learn, and you're very curious and inquisitive, so let's get on with that. So, we're going to step into the structure next, starting with the major arcana and the zodiac. And so, if you do not know and you do not use tarot, it is a 78-card system, which it has 3 parts. 2 major parts, but you can break down the minor arcana into 2. The first is the major arcana, which has 22 cards, starting with 0 and ending with card 21. Then following up, there is a minor arcana that has 56 cards in totality, but in the 2 breakdowns of that, there are the minor arcana numbered cards and then the court cards or face cards. The numbered cards, there are 40, and there are 16 face cards. So, that is the system very simply put. Now, the major arcana is, as I've said, 22 cards. It linked to planets, signs, Hebrew letters. I will not be noting too much about the Hebrew letters. Why? Because part of the Rider-Waite-Smith system is also based on the Kabbalah. I am not a student of the Kabbalah. I studied very basic understanding, and my understanding through the study, starting with T. Susan Chang's work and other works on the tarot, including, Mary K. Greer and also Rachel Pollack. Through my studies, this is Kabbalah. Kabbalah comes from a Judaic system that is a living culture, and I have zero interest unless I'm going in appropriating a living culture and their philosophies, unless I am a student of someone who is deeply well-versed, deeply educated in that particular system. And since that has not as yet happened, I am reticent to dig too deeply into the Hebrew letters. So, here's how we're going to go, and let me look a bit forward. Okay, so typically, here's some clear examples very quickly on the major arcana. These are the zodiacal, astrological, etc. So there are 3 ways of doing this major arcana. It'll be by element, by zodiac, that's the sign, and by planet. So when you see a card, or when you hear it referenced and you hear the zodiacal, astrological correspondences, it is one of these 3 major themes or major categories that you're going to see it filed under. So in the Golden Dawn system, the Fool corresponds to Uranus, the Mage to Mercury, the High Priestess to the Moon, the Empress to Venus, the Emperor to the sign Aries, the Hierophant to Taurus. Now you're going to note that starting with the Emperor and moving on, this is how it's going to be, and it's going to be, the signs are going to be presented zodiacally, meaning in the order that they appear, whereas planets not quite so much. And so moving on, the Hierophant is Taurus, is sign Taurus, the Lover is Gemini, Chariot Cancer, Strength is Leo, the Hermit is Virgo, the Wheel is Jupiter, which is card 10, card 11. So starting with the Fool being 0, the Mage would be 1, the High Priestess would be 2, the Empress 3, the Emperor 4, the Hierophant is 5, the Lovers is 6, the Chariot is 7, Strength is 8, 9 is the Hermit, and that's Virgo, the Wheel is 10, that's Jupiter, card 11 is Justice in Libra, card 12 is the Hanged One and assigned Neptune, card 13 is Death and assigned Scorpio, card 14 is Temperance and assigned Sagittarius, card 15 is Death and assigned Capricorn, card 16 is the Tower, assigned Mars, card 17 is the Star and assigned Aquarius, card 18 is the Moon, assigned Pisces, Card 19 is the sun, assigned to the sun. Card 20 is judgment, and it is fire or Pluto, depending on the system. And card 21 is the world, and it is Saturn, is the assigned astrological correspondence there. Next, we're going to step into how these associations aren't necessarily arbitrary. So, for example, and I'm going to give a few examples. So the first example would be the Emperor's leadership qualities are considered by the Golden Dawn to initiate, to be mirror Aries' initiating energy. So there's also a dispute about how knowledgeable the Golden Dawn actually was about Hebrew and the Kabbalah. This is one of the reasons why it's a challenge for me. But if we're looking at the Empress also, the Empress, consider that Venus, card 3, Venus, it is said to have an affinity for Venusian energies, which is pleasure, beauty, harmony. Usually when you see the Empress card, it's going to be a femme-presenting figure, usually pregnant, because fertility, creativity are keywords. You'll see a symbol, maybe a shield will have the Venus card on it. I would suggest that when possible, you can pause, and if you have a tarot deck, go get your Rider-Waite-Smith deck out, and if you do not, you can simply Google the Emperor, Rider-Waite-Smith, or any of the cards, and you will find a plethora of images. So, that's the Empress card, usually outside. Sometimes it will be a nighttime scene or a daytime scene, but that's how that looks. The Emperor is usually an older male presenting figure, usually in a suit of armor. The suit of armor has meaning, so all the images are going to have meanings, but we're not going to go into that today because we're talking astrology tarot. That's for another time. And so usually he's wearing a suit of armor, a cloak over it, and is seated on a throne with ram's heads, looking all powerful and as one might, And so the Emperor card is about society and order, and that initiating energy with Aries is how the affinity was made. And Venus harmonizing, beautifying, peace-seeking energies was given to card number 3, the Empress, which is the preceding card. And if you see the High Priestess, for example, you're going to see a moon on the card. A crescent moon will be underneath her foot. She will have 2 pillars, one black, one white, right behind her. And sometimes there'll be a scene behind her showing water, or sometimes it'll be veiled and you won't be able to see clearly what's behind her. And she will have a book in her lap, and she'll be pointing out a passage in that book, which stands for inner knowing. But it's also a veil. She is the gatekeeper to that inner knowing. So those are some of the cards symbolically. That's how the resonance is done. It's done by affinity, affiliation, rather than what is an antidote, because every card has a shadow. So it's done more toward these energies seem to be similar. And so that's how the assignment was done. And even T. Susan Chang notes in one of their books that they wondered if it was because, how do I put this? The wondering was not just how much they knew, but that they studied Kabbalah to a degree and then kind of twisted the system to make sense to their own system, which is the Golden Dawn system, because Kabbalah and Golden Dawn don't naturally line up perfectly, and so they had a vision, meaning a card with esoteric occult images that could be used for meditation, reflection, contemplation, etc., and could be used for magic, which was the whole point, because the Golden Dawn members saw themselves as ceremonial magicians, and so these cards were meant to help them with their practice of ceremonial magic. Now, The next point I would like to make is that this creates a narrative arc through the zodiac. And when you read the major arcana in sequence, it's meant to tell you a story. Now, here's a note about that. It does so imperfectly. And if we layer the hero's journey upon it, which is what some people might do, take Joseph Campbell's hero's journey concept, philosophy, structure, and apply it to the major arcana, it does not always neatly come together. So I should probably note that, and you should probably note that. So, next we're going to step into a brief overview of the minor arcana. And the minor arcana is numbered aces through 10. There are assigned 36 decans with 10-degree segments of the zodiac. So, decan just means 10, and that comes from astrology. Each sign of the zodiac has 3 decans of 10 degrees, starting from 0 to 9, 10 to 19, and 20 degrees to 29 degrees, and that's all 10 degrees each, and all the zodiac has decans. And I know there's a podcast episode I have that if you feel free, you can search through that. I explain in greater depth about that previously, but that's how the cards are assigned. They are assigned through 3 decans of 10 degrees each. Now, here's the thing. Whilst there is ace through 10, the decans only apply in cards 2 through 10. The aces are considered to be not exactly part of the system. So all aces, doesn't matter which, they're considered to be the potential of their suit rather than being part of the decan system. Okay, so that's one note I want to make. Now, each, like I said, each is 10 each, and each of them are ruled by a different planet. Now, the decans that I'm going to mention here are not going to be the same I might have mentioned elsewhere. These are called Chaldean decans, using the classical 7 planets, starting from slow to fast, which are as follows: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and repeating. So it will start with Mars, because Mars is the ruling sign of Aries, and it will conclude with Mars when we do it zodiacally, because it's based on the seasons using the classical planets. Okay, so because, consider this, here's a note also. The reason why you're not going to see Pluto used often is because at the point when this system was conceived of, Pluto had not yet been discovered. It was discovered in 1930. That is 1930, and was not therefore part of this system. But you will find modern practitioners who use Pluto in their practice of this particular system. So those are the planets, and so we're going to give you an example. Let me give you. So wands are fire, cups are water, swords are air, pentacles are earth. So the minor arcana is broken down into 4 elements, 4 classical elements: fire, earth, air, water. They will usually be put in a alchemical type of order when you open up the box. So the box will usually start with fire, follow up with water, then sometimes I've seen it air, earth. I'm not exactly certain those two, because they kind of flip, but it's like air, earth. That's how I believe that goes. And so we're going to start with the wands. Wands, fire. So starting with that first decan, Mars is in Aries. So the first decan, meaning cards 2, 3, and 4, would be considered the equivalent to the first 0 through 9 degrees of Aries, for example. And this repeats in all of the elements. So, when we're looking at cups, 2, 3, and 4 are always going to be a cardinal sign. In the case of water, it's going to be Cancer. 2, 3, and 4 of swords, air, is going to be Libra. 2, 3, and 4 of pentacles, earth, is going to be Capricorn. Okay, so that represent, now if we're looking at Mars and Aries, the first decan, meaning cards 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, and 4 of wands, it's going to be representing bold, initiation, dominance, and walking your own path. Okay, now if we're looking at, let me make certain that I am not over sharing. So just giving you a few examples, because this episode is meant to be an overview. I'm not going in with depth just yet. I'm introducing the concept because I like that idea of giving us a firm foundation on which to stand. So if we're looking at suit of wands, we're looking at, 2, 3, and 4 would be Mars in Aries and all that initiating energy, for example. Bold. Now, let's step forward to the court cards. And the court cards are going to start in the medieval type of energy. Medieval Europe, because they didn't have knights beyond that point. You're not going to hear too many knights after, like, Queen Elizabeth I. You're not going to hear pages, yes. Queens and kings, certainly, but knights were not as big a thing. Soldiers, absolutely. Mercenaries, obviously, but knights were more of a medieval thing. So there are 4 face cards, otherwise known as court cards, and they are linked to elements and zodiacal quadrants. So the cards are as follows: pages, knights, queens, and kings is how that goes. And this systemic approach can you allow everyone to interpret cards through both tarot symbolism and astrological timing. So when we're looking at pages in this particular system, it really does depend, because in this system it is always elemental. And so the pages are earth. The queens are water. The knights are fire. And the kings air. So sometimes you're going to hear the pages be spoken of if it's, for example, wands. The page of wands or page of fire is going to be earth of fire. And knights, here's what I've done. Yes. And knights will be the fire of fire. And the queens will be the water of fire. And the kings will be the air of fire. So that's how the Golden Dawn system encapsulates, quantifies, codifies, etc., codifies all of this knowledge. It's elemental, to keep it simple. And you could also numerically do this, but that is a subject for another time. So the whole point of putting an element on the court cards is to make it easier to read them. Now, here is another Golden Dawn system, because apparently the members of the Golden Dawn were not always unified in their understanding of knowledge or what they felt should be a proper association. So here's a second system. Pages are not part of the system. They're like the aces. So let's talk about the aces leading into the pages. The aces are always the potential of their suit, and so they stand for all of the signs. So since we're using the wands as an example, the Ace of Wands would be Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, potentially. Why? Because the Ace card is not enough information in and of itself. It is fiery energy. It has not yet coalesced or materialized, or whatever words you prefer to use when you talk about an idea or a concept or an energy or what have you becoming material. And so this potential could be Aries energy, it could be Leo, it could be Sagittarius. Now, looking at the page of fire, they are the potential of the court cards. They have not become anything per se. They are free-spirited and open, receptive, and curious, inquisitive, depending on how inquisitive or curious depends on the suit. And so, Page of Fire is going to be Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, much like the Aces. And that energy will also tap on to the Fool card, because the Fool is also that free-spirited, but it's I don't know yet type of energy, which you will find in Aces and which you will find in Pages as well. And when we look at Knights, well, Knights would be very depending, mutable energy. And the Kings are cardinal and the Queens would be fixed energy. And that basically means Knight mutable, adaptable, shape-shifty. Why? Because Knights are considered more young adult energy. And they have an idea of what they are or who they could possibly be, but it's not set in stone per se. They're still figuring it out. Whereas the Queens are sustaining energy, like a fixed sign. So mutable would be like all of the mutable signs would be, Sagittarius would be an example, so would Pisces, so would Gemini, and so would Virgo. The fixed signs, as to recall, would be Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius. The cardinal would be Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. Okay? So, when we're looking at the Knights, we're looking at Knight of Fire, we're looking at Sagittarian energy. When we're looking at the Queen of Fire, we're looking at Leo energy. And so you could kind of, use those energies, what you understand of astrology, to better interpret the tarot card deck. So if I'm looking at a Knight in Sagittarius, I'm looking at someone who is curious, a seeker, a truth seeker, who values freedom and the ability to go their own way, who is very enthusiastic and can't wait to share what they're learning, and that enthusiasm can be misinterpreted as dogmatic because this person's still learning. And people are like, well, hey, let's, dialogue here. Let's question the premise of what you're saying. Let me test this out with you. And the Knight of Fire, the Knight of Wands, is like, wait a minute. I've just learned this, and I'm curious about this, and I still want to play with it, and you're already asking me all these questions that I'm not yet prepared to answer because this thing is new to me, and I want to run it out and see where it goes on my own. Because generation theory. And the generation theory, note, is the idea, the philosophy, that if you want to understand, remember something, and have it make sense to you, you must generate the information yourself. Meaning, if you're studying astrology or tarot, you have to make your own notes in your own words, in your own hand, or your own way of your own voice, what have you. You understand? You have to put you into your ideas. Meaning that if you're studying astrology, listening to what I say is useful and helpful, but you must take what I say and put it in your own words according to your own experiences, so that's how you make sense of things. Okay, so when we're looking at the Knight of Fire, we're looking at an energy that's like, wait a second, I haven't yet generated my own ideas about this yet. I'm merely sharing with you what I'm learning because I find it fascinating and I'm curious. And so that energy gets misinterpreted as dogmatic, okay? And we're looking at the queens of fire or wands. That's Leo energy. Leo energy is proud, loves attention, wants to be seen, wants to be heard, but wants to be authentic. If you're going to see me and hear me, you're going to see me and hear me as I actually am, not who you want me to be, not the version of me that lives in your head, but the real, honest version of me. And they are creative, playful, but they do have a temper. That's temperamental energy, meaning I have a temper and I can get angry and snap. But it's warm, gregarious energy, much like the sun, which is the corresponding energy, which I will get to in a second. And then the king's cardinal, so that's Aries energy. It wants to break new ground, forge new paths. It wants to path with heart. It wants independence. I want to go my own way, and I do not want to ask for permission. I understand that other people exist, but this has to have heart for me. And this is Mars energy. Mars is the path with heart. It is passion. It is assertive. It is confident. It can look as if it's running roughshod over everything, but that's the energy that gets things done. Now, if I haven't said, Jupiter would be the planetary association for knights. And the Sun would be the planetary association for queens in this system, and Mars would be the planetary association for kings because of the signs of the zodiac that they are affiliated with. Now, like I said, you can use this to interpret both the tarot symbolism, and you can also use this for astrological timing, because that was the whole point. Reason why ceremonial mages would want astrology added to the cards is because these cards will give them an idea. It gives them something to meditate on, but it also gives them astrological timing. So if you see, for example, the moon card would be about 28 days. So maybe 28, maybe 29.5 days as a rule. That would be the cycle of the moon, because the moon will go through an entire 12 signs of the zodiac, with each being about 2.5 days in each sign. That'll be about a 28, 29.5 degree cycle. So that gives you an idea. It's like if you have a question like, hey, will I get this job? Well, first of all, the moon card's like, well, you should probably hold on a second. Don't make any false moves. That's an ambiguous card. It's more of a maybe, not a no. It's like, hold your horses, more information incoming, etc. So when you see the Two of Wands, for example, and that's Mars energy, that gives you an idea of maybe if you're going to do a ceremony for success or etc., or triumph or victory, also Mars keywords, you're probably going to want to line it up to the spring equinox or the moon in Aries, or when Mars happens to be at home in Aries, its home sign. These are ideal places for where you might want to time your ceremonial remediations so they best support your goals, your objectives, etc. Okay? And so I think that is enough for today to get us started. So the key takeaway here is that the Golden Dawn system provides a structured framework that connects tarot and astrology through symbolic correspondences. So the major arcana is assigned to planets, signs, and elements, and the minor arcana to decans, which line up to planets, and I gave an example of that. And so I invite all of you listening to pull a tarot card and look up the Golden Dawn Astrological Associations. Now, you can find that anywhere. There are several websites in which you can do so, Cafe Astrology, but you can also do astrostyle.com, because the Astro Twins have associations, but you can also do a search and say Golden Dawn astrological and tarot associations and correspondences and get all of that information, because it is literally everywhere. So the next episode in this series, we're going to delve deeper into the major arcana, and we're going to explore specific card, planet, sign pairings. And so thank you very much, all of you. I'm going to remind you that we have show notes, and you can support the podcast via the newsletter that we have, free and paid. You can support us also by listening to our podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple iTunes, and leaving reviews so other people can find us with greater ease. And we also have a tip jar. You'll find that in the show notes as well. And thank you very much. Peace and astro magic, star people.